Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P. Joe Pizzapia with me today. Mr. Big Pod Energy himself, refreshed from the weekend, Andrew Erickson. 3 days off and a wedding somewhere in between. The open bar was flowing, and Andrew Erickson's recovered, and he is here for the podcast today. And another friend of ours, we're going through the Action Network period of our lives right now, and Sean Koerner is going to join us here today on the program. It is very exciting to have Sean here on the show. We've actually never got to do a show together, the three of us, so this is going to be a good time. Now, Sean, I do want to ask you an important question before we begin, because in your Twitter profile, it says Fantasy Pros #1 ranker 2015, 2016, 2017. What happened to the dynasty? That's what I want to know, because from 2018 to 2022, there seems to be a gap here.
Yeah, I mean, let me just put it this way. It's really tough to win the contest. I mean, there's 140 of the top rankers in the world. So I'm just happy to win it the 3 years I did. And I actually won second place in 2014. So I stewed over that for about a year, and then I won in 2015. And yeah, I mean, I'm giving max effort every year, but just there's so many phenomenal experts out there. It's really tough. So hoping to get back on top, like maybe this year, I'm going to try. It's not a lack of effort, I'll tell you that.
Never. I would never, ever in a million years. You know, I've played leagues with you. You know, I respect all the great work you've done over the years. It's an amazing run. And I'm being facetious, because the fact that you were able to three-peat is a stunning bit of work. And today on the show, we're going to get Sean's input along with Andrew's about some of these early running back, wide receiver rankings, the undervalued, the overvalued players here in the early ranks. We'll probably hit some quarterbacks and tight ends also to give you a little full gamut of how that all looks. And it was great because you see how Sean didn't make any excuses, Andrew. So you've got no excuses this year. So it's not like, I got married this year or I had a kid and all of a sudden I dropped off of the rankings. I told Sealy when we had a couple weeks ago, we had Sealy on. I don't want to hear this. Now I got a girlfriend stuff when now he's not a top 10 ranker anymore. Enough of that noise.
Well, we'll be able to trace back where the steep fall starts to come for Sealy, so it's all good.
That's true. You can see all the graphs starting to go in the opposite direction. You can see all those things going here. Now, before we get going on all these rankings in review, I want to remind everybody too, this is June here basically. Now we're recording the last day of May, but we're in June, which is really the hot time of best ball season, and we have got your best ball draft kit ready to go at fantasypros.com/bestball. We've got all amazing content in there. We've got the best ball rankings, the ADP, the draft strategy articles, the roster construction advice. It's all in there. And guess what? It's free, kids. It's free at fantasypros.com/bestball. But for all of you who really take fantasy football super seriously, and I know most of you do, subscribe to Fantasy Pros and up that membership, and then you get extra goodies. You get all this extra best ball content you didn't even know we had, but it's all for you special. And again, you can get it at fantasypros.com/bestball. And guess what? We like to do nice things here. So once you become a premium member of Fantasy Pros, you can then turn that membership over to fantasypros.com/chat, join our Discord. Well, again, free to join, but when you're a member, it's like all of a sudden the velvet ropes just go up for you. You can come in, you can talk to Andrew Erickson on all kinds of stages. You can do the AMAs with me. You can do all these other things and all these channels you get access to during the season, outside of the season, when you're a premium member. So it pays to be a member here at Fantasy Pros. Again, you get extra on that best ball draft kit. You get extra on the fantasypros.com/chat side on the Discord. So come hang out with us. This is where the cool kids play fantasy football. Now, we're going to start here with the running backs because it's very important we do. And as always, we're going to be using our rankings. You can check them out as well at fantasypros.com/rankings. We got all the different ranks for best ball, for season long, dynasty. It's all up and ready to go because we never sleep here. Not even me with the 2 days off in a row. There was no sleeping. It was all still work. It was not really off. We're never really off here at Fantasy Pros. You're just mentally off for like a little period of time, but then you're right back in it. So let's start with our guest, Sean. I want to start with you. Let's talk about some guys right now, maybe early on in the ranks that you think are potentially undervalued. Give me one of those running back names.
Oh, so undervalued. I think I'm going to go with Kareem Hunt, and I was using ADP if that's all right. But right now,
of course it is
ADP running back 30, and he's literally my favorite type of running back to draft in this range because not only is he going to offer you, low end RB2 value even when Nick Chubb is healthy, but if Nick Chubb were to ever miss time, he's going to provide, borderline top 5 value. Hell, he was RB5 in weeks 1 through 5 last year when Nick Chubb was even healthy. So he just provides you so much upside. He's playable, even though he's sort of the backup. He's playable even when the starter's healthy. So he's my favorite type of running back to target, in the RB30 range. He's your RB3, or you're starting to build out your bench, and he comes loaded with upside. So I love Kareem Hunt in that range.
What do you think of Hunt's role with the new quarterback here with Watson? What do you think they might be able to get out of him that maybe Baker Mayfield and that offense hadn't been able to get out of before?
Well, it's just going to be a better offense, right? And just assuming Watson is, ready, or he's able to play week 1, there's going to be more touchdown upside. So that benefits a guy like Hunt, who, admittedly, he's probably due for a slight touchdown regression. But if the offense itself is scoring more touchdowns, that's going to help stabilize that. But just the offense being overall better, maybe a little bit more pass heavy, that's certainly going to favor Hunt.
And as you mentioned before, you have that upside. If something happens to Chubb and Hunt stays healthy, immediately becomes a number 1 guy, and you got him as the ECR right now in half PPR. He is 29. So that's incredible value there. All right, Erickson, give me an undervalued running back so far in ADP from what you've seen.
Yeah, I just want to hit on one thing about Kareem Hunt as well. I think that Kareem Hunt is someone that
not allowed.
He can be a trade candidate. Like, he's a screaming trade candidate for another team that might need a running back. If he lands on Houston, he's the RB1 there. Like, there are tons of backfields he could just go to if the Browns decide to trade him, where he's the immediate RB1. So he has so many avenues where he can become an RB1, and then you have the standalone if he just stays in Cleveland. So I think that's a really great call by Sean. So for me, I'm going to go with Cam Akers, running back for the Los Angeles Rams. So his ECR is RB17, ADP right around that range at RB16. And I mean, this guy has gone through every type of ranking. I remember right after in one of the playoff rounds when he had 27 touches, Sony Michel had 3. He was like a top 5 running back for next year, like in early 2022 draft rankings. And now he's kind of fallen because the efficiency wasn't that great. They used Darrell Henderson a little bit more in the Super Bowl. And all indications to me are that he's still the clear-cut RB1 in this backfield. When he was healthy last year, when he came back, he wasn't even supposed to come back at all. And people are like holding that against him, that he came back from this Achilles injury that was supposed to knock him out for the entire season. People aren't holding that against Travis Etienne. Oh, well, he didn't come back. Yeah, because his team sucked. That's why he didn't come back. Cam Akers gutted it out to try to come back for his team. And yeah, he wasn't that efficient. But it's not because of him necessarily. The schedule was absolutely brutal. San Francisco 49ers, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Like, a lot of really great run defenses. And when you look at his rushing yards, 95% of them came after contact. He was doing everything on his own. And he was coming off an Achilles injury. Like, cut the guy some slack. Because the Rams are a high-powered offense, and I want their starting running back on my team. And that's going to be Cam Akers. So I don't understand necessarily where... I mean, I could easily see him being a guy we should be ranking in round 2, but now he's going in round 4. So he's kind of like in that dead zone where usually we don't want to take a lot of running backs, but the reason he's there is because he's inefficient. Something that's not sticky year over year. Look at any efficiency metric for a running back except for Nick Chubb averaging 5 yards per carry. The only efficiency mark that is stable year over year. I mean, his yards per carry could easily bounce back up next year. They have a really easy schedule to open the season. So people are going to look at Cam Akers. He's going to be a value during the first month of the season.
Andrew, I'm curious to know, I know this is early ADP. At what point, as we go on through the summer, where the ADP rises on Cam Akers, do you get uncomfortable? Is there a number you get uncomfortable? If it breaks top 12, does that become an uncomfortable place for you with Cam Akers?
Not necessarily, but it won't rise because people have made up their minds with Cam Akers. It's 2.4 yards per carry, Joe. People cannot get that out of their mind of how abysmal that number is.
But it might, because we know, and we've seen in the past, as training camp goes on, there are injuries. So sometimes it might go up. I mean, look at last year, right? We lost a bunch of running backs here. We lost all the Ravens running backs within like a week of each other. So all of a sudden, sometimes by default, those numbers go up. So I was just curious, even if it's by default, is there an uncomfortability factor at all potentially in that number? But I think you laid it out there, which is, once again, kind of like Sean was saying, let's look for guys in good offenses. That's the theme, I feel like, of 2022 that we're trying to drive home to people. This is what we're trying to do. All right, give me another underrated running back. Sean Koerner, who you got?
Well, normally I don't consider guys coming off a 15 touchdown season as underrated, but for some reason, James Conner is still being drafted in the, RB20 range, which is a great time to take him. He has pretty good job security for, who's being drafted as a low end RB2. This is the range where you start to see backs in committee situations. He should benefit from Chase Edmonds in Miami now. He was the RB2 overall in weeks 9 through 14 when Edmonds was out due to injury. They just brought in Darrell Williams. They drafted Keontae Ingram. They're probably going to compete for the Chase Edmonds role. I don't really anticipate them really eating into Connor's role too much. He's obviously not going to match his 15 rushing touchdowns from last year. I'm projecting him closer to 9 because he should still see plenty of goal line chances. Once DeAndre Hopkins returns, this could be the best Cardinal offense we've seen yet. They're going to have Marquise Brown. They'll have Zach Ertz starting week 1. Rondale Moore could be better in year 2. So, I think Connor's still going to see plenty of touchdown chances and plenty of volume. So I like getting basically whatever running back in this range falls to me. And so far it's been James Conner in the RB20 slot.
Yeah, right now he's in the ECR at 14. And look, if you can get him at 20, and I've seen him go later too, and I think 14 seems more reasonable to me, where you're taking a little bit of the injury history into account, a little bit of the touchdown regression into account, but you're still valuing what the player did last year. I think that's important. I think that has merit, doesn't it? That his role in the offense could even be bigger than it was year over year. And I feel like that's sort of getting lost to the wayside a little bit. Do you feel that same way when it comes to Connor?
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, every running back sort of has the injury risk in this range. He stayed healthy last year, and I was pretty high on him last year, but honestly, I was surprised how good he looked. Obviously, his efficiency stats weren't phenomenal by any stretch, but, that's kind of what you expect with Connor. He's more of a grinder, but he really passed the eye test. He's still sort of at the tail end of his prime, so yes, he sort of had an injury history in the past, but honestly, any running back that's going to be getting, close to 20 touches a game has injury risk. So I'm kind of overlooking that with him.
All right, Andrew, let's go to you for another underrated running back so far in early ADP. Who comes to mind?
I'm going to go, I'm diving deep. I'm getting out of the stud category. I'm going to some of these late round running backs, and it's Sony Michel, Cam Akers' backup last year. I mean, where he's going right now, so his ECR is RB48, so not even, he's barely in RB4 territory. His ADP in best ball is RB61, and I'm going to be honest, who is an established 3-down running back on the Miami Dolphins? It's Sony Michel. He is the one established 3-down back. Raheem Mostert is going to turn 30 this year. Chase Edmonds, we've seen it before with him where, yes, he's explosive, but he's limited. He gets hurt every single season, like Raheem Mostert, whereas Sony Michel showed last year that, hey, I can carry the load. I was averaging over 20 touches per game as the Rams' pseudo bell cow when Darrell Henderson and Cam Akers were both hurt. So they brought him in on a cheap deal, which I think could be overvalued or overstated based on when they signed him. I mean, the Buccaneers signed Fournette before last year to a really cheap deal. And people were like, that doesn't mean they don't value him. He had no market, and that was just totally wrong. That didn't matter. It's just because teams are smart and they know how to attack the running back position in free agency that you don't need to prioritize it. It doesn't necessarily dictate, workload and role on the offense. So for me, Sony Michel, there's nothing about his numbers last year that pop out to me. He's this guy's this super efficient running back. But when I'm looking at the opportunity in a backfield where he should benefit from a favorable run scheme with Mike McDaniel coming over from the 49ers, I think that Michel, he's free. And he could lead the team in carries in an offense that we all expect. They have a bunch of guys going in the top 15. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waller both top 15 in terms of ADP, ECR, wide receivers. So this offense must be good in some way. And who's going to get the goal line opportunities? Could be Sony Michel. So I think that Michel is he's such a guy where you could see the path where he blows away his ADP.
Remind me when you turn 30 in a couple of years to remind you that you're beginning to hit the downturn of your career. I just want you to remind me to do that. Let's go to some of the guys that we think are a little overrated. Sean, let's start with you on these. Give me 2 names, 2 running backs that you think are a little overrated and why in what you've seen so far in early ADP.
So the first back, I hate to do this, but it's Kenneth Walker at running back 28. And he's the guy where I just love the talent, but I hate the situation for this season specifically. The Seahawks are in rebuild mode after trading away Russell Wilson. Their 5.5 win total is one of the lowest in the league. So, they're going to likely be trailing a ton this season. And that's not good for, Walker's skill set. He's going to struggle as a pass protector. He's not going to be heavily involved in the receiving game, especially as a rookie. So, they could be in a lot of trailing game scripts where he's, pigeonholed into just early down work. And he could be splitting time with Rashad Penny. I mean, they just signed him for a 1-year deal, close to $6 million. So I don't think they're just going to bench Rashad Penny outright. I don't know what's going on with Chris Carson, but I'm assuming he's not going to be ready anytime soon. So with that aside, you're just going to have a split backfield where he's not going to be able to get that receiving work on, a bad team. So it's just a bad situation. I feel like his floor is just a little bit too low to be taking him in the RB 28 range. Again, I'd rather have a guy like Kareem Hunt where we kind of know he's going to provide low-end RB2 value with, high-end RB1 upside if Nick Chubb were to go down. So, Kenneth Walker in 2023 and beyond, I'll probably be interested in, but just for his rookie season, I don't like the situation.
All right. So Kenneth Walker, one of them. Who's another one, in your opinion, Sean, that you think is a little too rich for your blood right now?
Yeah, my other, Antonio Gibson, it's close because I do like him. I think, his ADP of 14 is tough because if he does fall to the RB 19 range, I'm willing to take him. Just right now, he benefited from J.D. McKissick, missing the final 6 games last year. I think Gibson has the potential to be a true 3-down back, and we did see that a lot last year. Both McKissick back, that's going to cap his receiving upside a bit. And then, the Commanders drafting Brian Robinson in the 3rd round is not a great sign. He could eat into Gibson's short yardage work, possibly goal line carries, which is kind of scary for me. So while I do like Gibson, I just rather take guys like Saquon Barkley, Leonard Fournette, James Conner even, and probably even Zeke, sort of in this range. I just think they have a little bit more job security. Not that Gibson's going to lose his job. He's a sort of pigeonholed in sort of a committee. So I'm a little skittish on Gibson around RB 14, but if he drops to that RB 19 range, I'm sort of all in on him.
I didn't really want to buy into McKissick's back, so all of a sudden Antonio Gibson can have a good fantasy season in 2022. But you're right. I think it's that Brian Robinson 3rd round pick where you spend the draft capital on another running back, and then you hear Ron Rivera saying things like, we want to go back to the time where it was D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart. We're going to ground and pound. Now, look, both those guys were useful in fantasy. There's no doubt. They certainly had good seasons together. But right off the bat, that starts to make people a little gun shy, I feel like, about Antonio Gibson, because you say, well, he's also then capped in terms of the ceiling. So is that what it looks like to you? It's more just you feel like his ceiling might be more capped than somebody like a Connor or a Barkley. If things break right for those guys, they're RB1s, but it's going to be tougher for Gibson to maybe get there.
Yeah, he obviously has RB1 potential. So he probably needs one of those 2 backs to get injured. And honestly, this is the range where I typically like to draft wide receivers. And I call this range sort of the frozen pond tier because, last year you had guys like Mike Davis and Myles Gaskin being drafted in this range. And I was like, I'm not drafting those guys. But now we have, Gibson, I said, I love Gibson. We have Fournette, Zeke, Barkley in this range. So, just running back seems loaded. So I'm willing to just take any of those guys that sort of fall in that RB 19-20 range. So Gibson's is sort of sitting at the top of that tier, essentially at RB 14. So that's why I'm saying he's overvalued. Love the talent. But yeah, I just think he's sort of being pigeonholed in a path that's more of a low-end RB2 if all these guys stay healthy.
All right, Andrew, let's go to you for some of the overvalued early running backs when you're looking at the ADP. Who comes to mind? So
actually, I also had Antonio Gibson as one of my running backs listed. And I think it's really interesting. I think it's worth expanding the conversation on Gibson because he has a very wide range of rankings in ADP based on where you look. So on Underdog Best Ball, he's running back 23. So he's absolutely buried on that platform because people are writing him off based on the Brian Robinson addition. And it doesn't really add up to me because you're looking at, there are a lot of committee backs that are going farther ahead of him. Nick Chubb is in a committee. We talked about him earlier. Javonte Williams has come out and said that he has the same role in the offense as he did last year when he was RB17 with Melvin Gordon. So, okay. And then you have Antonio Gibson, who has been a top 12 running back. I know you said potential for an RB1, but he's been a top 12 running back the last 2 years. So he's already done it twice. And he has room to grow because of an injury happened. So then you could see him. It's like, I want to buy more into, and it really depends on where you're looking. He could be overvalued because I could see him going in round 3, but then I also see drafts where he's going like at the beginning of round 6. And you're like, oh my God, like Antonio Gibson in round 6? Like it's exactly kind of what happened to Josh Jacobs last year a little bit where they added Kenyon Drake and everyone was like, oh, like he sucks. Like you can't do it. And then what did they do? Oh, they went away from Kenyon Drake. Josh Jacobs scored a bunch of touchdowns and he saw an expanded role in the passing game. Like I know we all try to project, like we know exactly how these running backs are going to be used in the passing game, but I think it makes a lot of sense to kind of admit that there's so much ambiguity that goes along with that, especially when players are in new offenses, there's new quarterbacks, there's so much that goes into it. And they may wake up one day and be like, you know what? We're going to throw the ball to Gibson today and not use McKissick. And then you were stressing over taking a guy that was uber talented, that's been an RB1 in back-to-back years, and you weren't going to take him when he fell into round 5 because, oh no, like Ryan Robinson, a 3rd-round pick. I mean, be more concerned about Kareem Hunt or a Melvin Gordon, these established guys that have been RB1s before. Brian Robinson has never played in the NFL. He had one good year of college production at Alabama. So I think that Antonio Gibson, yes, I think that in round 3, I think kind of what Sean was alluding to, like at that RB14, I think that is a little rich. But I mean, if he continues to fall as people continue to write him off, like I'm buying the talent there. I mean, it kind of reminds me a little bit what happened with Jonathan Taylor last year, where we started diving in too deep with Nyheim Hines usage. It was like, oh no, like this isn't going to work. And it was like, maybe just to zoom out and be like, wow, Jonathan Taylor is literally nasty. Let's just draft a really good running back. And you can look at the running back situation where Gibson is in terms of like how good is the Washington offense going to be? Well, if Carson Wentz is the quarterback, well, we saw that offense last year with Indianapolis produce the RB1 in fantasy. So there is a path with Gibson if he continues to fall where I'm going to buy, because a couple weeks ago I said he was going to be a bust, but that was at his current price, which was like 30 overall, which is where ECR has him. But in a lot of drafts I've seen, it's like in the 60s, like late 60s or early 60s where he's going. So I think Gibson is a very polarizing player that's going to be interesting to see where it kind of settles.
And I remember with David Montgomery too, a lot of people saying, well, Tariq Cohen's going to come back. And when Tariq Cohen comes back, forget it. I mean, there's a lot of these. And I think it's a really good discussion to have, to remind everybody of saying number ones are number ones of the depth chart for a reason. Sure, you have to take some other things into account, but I'm kind of, in this place with Antonio Gibson where I just like the talent more than the other guys on the roster. So I'll buy into the talent, but the later you can get him is great. I mean, he would be the ideal. If I go big time running back early and then load up on wide receivers, you're telling me in the 4th round or something, I can get Antonio Gibson, sign me up. Like, that's the perfect kind of guy to draft. Give me another guy you think is overvalued at the running back position, Erickson.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Ezekiel Elliott, Dallas Cowboys, a running back. So his ECR is RB20, his best ball ADP is RB17, which I was actually kind of surprised because usually people just hate Zeke and they just never want to take him. But his best ball ADP is actually higher than the experts have him. I have him ranked a little bit farther back in the back end RB2 range. And it's not that I don't think he can meet this ADP, because he probably can, because Zeke doesn't miss games. 6 NFL seasons, he has missed 1 game due to injury. 1 game. And it's funny because we talk about Tony Pollard as this like amazing handcuff that everyone needs to have in overdrafts every single year, when Zeke never gets hurt and doesn't ever miss games. So you're literally drafting an upside of a player that never comes to fruition. And I actually kind of wanted to loop in Tony Pollard as a potential guy that I think is overvalued, because why would I draft Tony Pollard when I can get Alexander Mattison? Like 3 rounds later, he has 5 games on his resume over the last 2 years where he has at least 23 touches. He's smashed on almost every game that Dalvin Cook has missed. Dalvin Cook always misses games every single year, unlike Ezekiel Elliott. And I just don't, and we've never even seen Tony Pollard operate as a 3-down bell cow.
Can I answer that question? Or I think is a theoretical answer to that question. Maybe, Sean, you want to, I think people's logic is, but Pollard has a role in the offense when Zeke is there. So I see him as a flex guy who can be now more. Sean, do you think that's what people think?
I think,
and that's why.
Yeah, I think people just think there's a path for Pollard to potentially overtake Zeke this year, which is great. Jerry Jones is never going to let that happen. Whereas that's not really possible for Madison to leapfrog Dalvin Cook. And he definitely needs Dalvin Cook to miss time to have value. But I think people see a potential Kareem Hunt situation where Pollard might be able to provide low-end RB2 flex value even when Zeke is healthy. But yeah, I'm with you. I think Madison is the premier backup running back that you want to target a little bit later on. I think where Pollard's going is a bit rich.
Yeah.
Andrew, any other thoughts on Zeke that you wanted to unload?
Yeah, man. So the fact that he's going to reach ADP like last year, basically he was RB6 overall, but he was RB16 in terms of points per game. I think that's kind of what we're going to see from him kind of from here on out. Like, he's going to play, he's going to grind his way to give you RB2 middling production every single week. He's never going to give you really these massive spike weeks unless he scores. And I think that we get too attached to, his touchdown upside in the Dallas offense. Like, there's a lot of guys that have touchdown upside in their backfields. Josh Jacobs, he's got touchdown upside. And on the Raiders, that's a good offense. What about Washington? Antonio Gibson has scored double-digit touchdowns over the last 2 years. Is Brian Robinson going to be the goal line back? as a rookie? I don't think so. So why are we chasing Zeke's touchdowns as his only avenue when touchdowns tend to be fluky year over year? We all are projecting Tony Pollard to have a larger role in the offense. We saw it last year. Tony Pollard had 3 more touches per game than the year prior. Zeke had 3 touches less or fewer per game. I just don't think that we're going to see the volume from Zeke. I think that you're just hoping it's touchdowns, and it's like, all right, that turns into RB2 production. And there are just so many receivers, I think, that you're going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe I drafted Zeke over insert wide receiver breakout here than Zeke. I just think that's ultimately, it's not even the fact that he's like a bad running back option. It's that there are so many receivers in his range of ADP that I would rather swing and miss on. Be like, you know what, if it's not Gabriel Davis that doesn't break out, like I swung and missed. But the fact that I could like land a Cooper Kupp type player where Zeke is being drafted, because I know Zeke's not going to be a difference maker for me. He's going to be my RB2. He's going to do decent every single week. I'm going to be like, okay, that's great, but I don't want to miss on any of these, level jumping wide receivers.
I'll stir the pot a little further even. I remember more than one occasion last year watching Zeke down around the goal line area, around the 5 or something like that, to get handed the ball and then get taken down by a corner, a single tackle. That's something you'd never see.
I remember that there was one game where he was like going to the corner, he just couldn't get there.
Exactly what I'm talking about, right? And it wasn't like a great corner. It wasn't like somebody you're like, oh, well, that makes sense. You're like, geez. And I saw it happen another time or two throughout the season where I said, man, that's just not the same guy that we remember with the same burst, with the same power. And look, maybe he wasn't 100% last year. That is all fair. Football is a tough game, but it's a lot of tread on those tires. So a lot to take in there. Let's move on to the wide receiver position. Sean, let's go over to you. Give me some wide receivers that you think right now are currently being undervalued. Who's the first name on your list that comes to mind?
First name has to be Allen Lazard. Right now, his ADP is wide receiver 57. I'm ranking him close to my top 40, so he's wide receiver 42 for me right now. But he isn't the flashy pick that you like to take later in the draft, but he has league-winning potential. It's very possible he will be Aaron Rodgers' number 1 target this season. He has massive touchdown upside either way. But just, with the Packers losing Devontae Adams, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, I think, Watson and Watkins will help replace that, but they won't be able to replace nearly all that production. So Lazard's going to benefit a ton. He already has a ton of chemistry with Aaron Rodgers, and he's only going to be 26 years old this season. So he's still in his prime. Sign me up for Allen Lazard at wide receiver 57, unless they do something crazy, like sign, one of the top receivers still available. Like I would still kind of take him in this range. So right now at wide receiver 57, I'm getting a ton of Lazard in best ball drafts.
Now, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, you know that Sean's wearing his Green Bay Packers hat today. But I want to also turn my key on Lazard, and I know Andrew Erickson loves Lazard too. We've talked about this. Andrew, I mean, it just seems like we keep looking around for who the answer is to what's the question? Who's going to lead the Packers in targets this year? It's hard not to land on Lazard when you start peeling back the layers of the onion and look at what's in front of you and look at what you've seen in the past. So is Lazard also one of those guys for you?
Yes, he is. And even though the Aaron Jones splits with Devontae Adams not in the lineup are very juicy, where Aaron Jones is like averaging like 7 targets per game, I think that, from a receiver standpoint, I mean, Lazard has the trust of Aaron Rodgers. And that's such a big thing for Rodgers as a veteran quarterback. We've seen so many of these veteran guys get rookies that, are talented and have this explosive upside like a Christian Watson, but you got to develop that rapport with your quarterback. Lazard, I'm pretty sure, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure Allen Lazard and Aaron Rodgers shared a turkey once at Thanksgiving. So I think that is something that is worth buying into.
That's news to me, but I believe it. And hold on, I'm bumping him up to.
I was going to say he just moved him up to from 40 to 39. There it was, there.
He's just going up in my rankings because of that.
All right, Sean, give me another one of the names on your list that you think is underrated at the wide receiver position when looking at early ADP.
It's got to be Gabe Davis. And I was ready to go all in on Davis heading into last year. Same with my colleague, Chris Raybon, who you had on last week. But then the Bills decided to bring in Emmanuel Sanders, which threw some cold water on that. So I backed off a lot. But now, they're moving on from Manny Sanders and Cole Beasley. They added Jamison Crowder, but, that's not slowing the Gabe Davis train for me. 2022 will be the true breakout season. He probably is going to be Josh Allen's number 2 target this year. I was a bit worried, honestly, after that 4 touchdown game against the Chiefs that his ADP would sort of be out of control this year, but wide receiver 38, that's still not high enough. I'm ranking him as my wide receiver 28. And I think Andrew alluded to earlier, he has league winning upside. Like he has high end wide receiver 2 potential in this offense. So I just think his ceiling is much, much higher than his current ADP. So I think he's still undervalued right now.
I went headstrong last year, Sean. I ignored the Sanders signing. I ignored Beasley, and I said, nope. I saw enough Gabe Davis last year at the end of the year, especially in big spots, especially in the red zone, catching touchdowns. If this young quarterback feels confident in that young wide receiver, I'm going to buy in. And unfortunately, it took me to the playoffs to see it. But so I'll be back with you this year buying back in. Andrew, who are you buying in on? Who is undervalued at wide receiver right now, in your opinion?
You could copy and paste this player from like the past 5 years. It's Brandon Cooks for the Houston Texans. 2021, he was wide receiver 20, wide receiver 22 in points per game. He has finished worse than the fantasy wide receiver 20 only once since 2015. That was because of injury. He has over 1,000 receiving yards 6 times with 4 different teams since 2015. And, last year he was turning at 28 years old. He was ranked 4th in air yard share, 9th in target share. And during the last 4 weeks, with Davis Mills as quarterback, when we saw Davis Mills kind of take a second step forward in the second half of the season, I mean, Cooks, again, was just a monster. Was top 10 fantasy points per game to go along with a top 5 target rate per route run. So Brandon Cooks is one of those guys where he's a target hog. I'm not afraid of the other receivers in that Texans passing game where you have Nico Collins, unproven second-year player, John Mechie coming off an injury, a rookie second-round pick, Brevin Jordan, a tight end that was a fifth-round pick, where Davis Mills is going to lock on to Brandon Cooks again. And he's going to deliver again. He's going to have 1,000 yards again. So it's just so easy to just Brandon Cooks, you just draft him and then you feel good. That's all you have to do. Now, he doesn't necessarily have, I think, league winning upside because of the offense he plays in, but he's a player that you're just looking for a value option. Brandon Cooks he's always right there for you.
All right. Who else is a value option and a wide receiver for you?
Yeah, so this guy is really interesting because his ADP, again, similar to a guy like Gabriel Davis, where it's kind of all over the place depending on where you look. So Mike Williams, in terms of ECR, Mike Williams from the Los Angeles Chargers, his ECR is wide receiver 25, but his best ball ADP over on Underdog is wide receiver 13. So it's very wide in terms of how people are viewing Mike Williams, where the experts are saying that he is a wide receiver, back-end wide receiver 2, and the drafters that are drafting right now, the D-gens, the true D-gens, are looking at him as a wide receiver 1. And when you look at what he did last year, he was a top 12. He was the wide receiver 12 in half-point scoring last year. He scored more fantasy points than Keenan Allen did in half-point scoring. And I'm not sure if the wide receiver 25 ECR is necessarily indicating that happened. He was better than Keenan Allen was last year in terms of fantasy points per game. Now, I know a lot of it happened at the beginning of the season, but I mean, how can you not like the situation for Mike Williams? We're talking about drafting guys on good offenses. Justin Herbert going to his 3rd year with Mike Williams, who continually operates as the number 1 red zone option on the Los Angeles Chargers. So I don't necessarily think I'm not gonna rank him as wide receiver 13. I think that's really, really high, but I fall somewhere in the middle. I definitely want to rank him higher than wide receiver 25 in terms of ECR. I think that one of the craziest stats about Mike Williams is he has 40 end zone targets since 2019, and he has converted just 8 into touchdowns. And he had 5 last year. So he's way overdue for touchdown regression. And coming from a quarterback that we know could easily throw 40 touchdowns next year, I mean, Mike Williams, double-digit touchdowns, 1,000+ yards. I think that's so in his range of outcomes. And Keenan Allen's another year older. Keenan Allen had his worst yards per route run last year since 2014. He saw his target share dip dramatically. It was 28% with Justin Herbert in 2020. It was 22% last year. So, I mean, Mike Williams looks like he's an ascending rocket that could really blow up, and the best ball drafters are already on Mike Williams. So I think Mike Williams as ECR wide receiver 25 is a bit too low for me.
Now, Sean, Mike Williams always has a penchant for the big games, too. Is that part of the inflation of this rate you're seeing in best ball when it comes to his ADP?
Yeah, plus he's inconsistent. In best ball, you don't need to really figure out when he's going to go off or have a dud. You're going to get all the good games. And he was the receiver I had the most exposure to last year. And I felt like a genius after week 5. And I felt like an idiot in the second half. So, I mean, he's a best ball wide receiver just because what I said. It doesn't matter when he goes off. Those first 5 weeks made it worth his ADP. He could have been out the rest of the season. It didn't matter. So like Andrew said, just being Justin Herbert's number 2 target is valuable in itself. But just, the way he plays the game, he's more of a deep threat. He has massive touchdown upside. His ceiling is absolutely, a top 10 wideout. So I think best ball is the format to take him. In redraft leagues, he could be a little bit of a headache just because you kind of have to figure out when you play him. But I think this year, if he falls outside of the top 20, I'll target him. But his ADP is all over the map for a reason. He's a pretty volatile player.
All right, who's a wide receiver, Sean, in your opinion, that you think is overrated based on early ADP you've seen?
I mean, he's overrated based on the situation, but AJ Brown at wide receiver 8, I mean, he's got to be a top 5 wideout in the league. But in terms of fantasy, this is going to be a tricky situation for him to top that. I think this represents closer to his ceiling, unfortunately. And, he was already able to thrive in a run-first offense in Tennessee, where he didn't need many targets to see massive production. But, defenses, were stacking the box to try to slow down Derrick Henry. They were banking on play action. I think he's going to have to, find his role in this offense. He could get off to a slower start than people anticipate. But, he makes Jalen Hurts, my favorite quarterback to target. So I love him as a talent, but just based on this move, I think it does hurt his value a bit because he will be competing with, Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert for targets. So he might be a little bit more inconsistent than we would like. I would like for him to fall, around the wide receiver 12 to 15 range to feel comfortable taking him. But just at wide receiver 8, that's a little bit too rich for me.
I feel like we have different camps here, right? Because we're trying to push people towards good offenses with good quarterbacks, right? That's where the good wide receiver play is going to come from. And then we have to juggle the talent. You just said it yourself. Right. AJ Brown's a top 5 talent, and he's also been super efficient. So I think if you're an AJ Brown fan, you keep pointing to the efficiency. You keep pointing to, well, he did it with Ryan Tannehill. Well, he didn't have a lot of targets before, and he was great because you just want to keep buying in. So it feels like you're kind of more on the other end of the spectrum, though, that it's still an offense that doesn't push the ball downfield a whole lot, and it doesn't have a running back like Derrick Henry where everybody has to be honest defensively.
Yeah, and I would say the best way I want to invest in AJ Brown, and I would say the best way to do that is to target Jalen Hurts. And you will get AJ Brown's production, and you'll get
That was
Jalen
very
Hurts
zen,
production.
Sean. That was very good. I like this.
Yeah, I have to find an angle to actually invest in AJ Brown, and it's not drafting him specifically. It's through Jalen Hurts, the big brain play here.
That was your moment of zen on the Fantasy Pros podcast. All right, give me another name who's overvalued right now at wide receiver, Sean.
Oh, it's got to be the other Brown, who I actually, again, I like his talent, don't like the situation, but it's Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown. He's going at wide receiver 20, which is about where I'm going to be ranking him the first 6 weeks when DeAndre Hopkins is out. But unfortunately, when Hopkins comes back after serving a 6-game suspension, I'm probably going to be ranking Brown, closer to the wide receiver 28, wide receiver 30 range, because he's going to have to compete with Hopkins, obviously, but Zach Ertz, to a lesser extent, AJ Green, and Rondale Moore could have a year or two leap. And he was a target hog last year in his limited playing time. So I just don't see the path for Brown hitting value outside of the first 6 weeks here. And in redraft leagues, you kind of want that production at the end of the season of the fantasy playoffs. Or if you're in a best ball league that has those massive tournaments at the end of the season, he's not going to provide that upside later in the season. So he's just a guy where, he's going to have a sugar rush the first 6 weeks or so, but then he's going to regress a bit. So I think just his ADP is sort of just assuming he's going to be playing with that DeAndre Hopkins all season, which is not the case. So I'm a little bit lower on Brown outside of his ADP of wide receiver 20 right now.
So if everyone's taking notes here, listening to the podcast, you want to trade him in week 5. That's what you want to do. You trade him in week 5 and downgrade all wide receivers with the last name Brown.
Apparently.
Apparently. All right, let's go over to you here, Erickson. Give me names of wide receivers that you believe right now are a bit overrated when you're looking at the overall ADP.
Deontay Johnson has ECR wide receiver 13 for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I can't, it's egregious to me. I'm sorry, experts, but wide receiver 13 for Deontay Johnson attached to Kenny Pickett. Like, this isn't Deontay Johnson from last year with Big Ben dropping back and throwing the ball 600 times and always looking Deontay Johnson's way. We want receivers on good offenses. The Steelers offense is not going to be good next year. Like, I feel pretty good about it. It'll be mediocre at best, I think is a fair assessment. We looked at the rookie quarterbacks last year. The best receiver we got was the aforementioned Brandon Cooks, who was wide receiver 20. And Deontay Johnson is wide receiver 13. Are we expecting Mitchell Trubisky and/or / Kenny Pickett to fuel that. I just don't see that happening. I don't understand how he can be ranked that high. You look at his 26% target share. Yeah, if you want to pay a premium for that at the top of round 3, you could. Or you could just draft Darnell Mooney in round 6, who also had a 26% target share. I just don't, the biggest mistake I made last year drafting was paying up for guys for targets. Just raw targets, not efficiency. And that made me have a lot of teams with McLaurin and DJ Moore. And I lost a lot of leagues because of that, because I wasn't drafting efficient guys that had touchdown upside and the potential to do a little bit more with less. And Deontay Johnson, are we going to really believe that this offense is going to throw the ball 600 times next year with a rookie quarterback or a new quarterback under center? I don't think that's going to happen. Najee Harris is bulking up to take on 400 touches. Like, the dude's going to McDonald's twice a day to bulk up so he can get 400 carries next year. So Deontay Johnson, even if the target share, even if it stays the same with a new quarterback, the total attempts in this offense is going to go down. If you look back at 2019, Big Ben missed 2 games. The Steelers ranked 23rd in pass play rate. Nobody on the offense saw more than 100 targets. Over the last 2 seasons, the pass play rates have ranked top 3 in the NFL. So for Deontay Johnson to be a wide receiver 13, it's blasphemy, honestly. It was the most egregious ranking I saw doing all of these.
All right. How do you really feel about Deontay Johnson?
Dude, it sucks because I liked him a lot last year. But
I do too.
The price,
you know what would hit home for me? And I think I would love to hear more analysts say this when you're talking about, like, I had a theory last year, I had research last year, and I had a pathway, and it didn't work out, and I know why. And I thought that was really profound. And it was great to hear you say that and say it wasn't so much the volume, so much as the efficiency. And I think that's great that we are always constantly trying to push ourselves and be better. And that just really hit home for me. So kudos to you. I don't even know what kudos are, but I want to give them to you. I'll give you another guy, Andrew, that's overvalued right now at the wide receiver position from what you've seen.
Yeah, so for me, it's Tyreek Hill at ECR, wide receiver 9, best ball ADP, wide receiver 9. I just don't see Tua Tagovailoa fueling not just one top 15 receiver, but 2, because Jalen Waddle's also ranked inside the top 15. And that's a lot. The other quarterback that is fueling the two top 15 receivers in terms of ADP is Joe Burrow. And then Tua. It just makes it really hard for me to envision, especially with Mike McDaniel coming over from the 49ers offense, which has been a run-heavy offense. He was a former run game coordinator. They brought in Chase Edmonds. I just don't envision, if this is the 49ers offense in South Beach, then why are we excited to draft 2 wide receivers from this team with Tua as their quarterback? I don't understand it. And the fact that, Tyreek Hill's greatest weapon, in my opinion, or greatest asset that he can add to a team is the ability to take the top off a defense. His elite speed as one of the best vertical threats, not only in today's current NFL, but arguably in NFL history. Tua doesn't go deep. I'm sorry. And you can watch whatever video you want of him hitting a deep ball downfield or his efficiency metrics on a extremely small sample size, because that's the fact of the matter is he doesn't go downfield that much because the team doesn't trust him to go downfield. And when they lay something up for him, he doesn't throw the ball. So for me, I don't necessarily look at Tua's efficiency from a deep ball perspective and look at that as, this is a great indication that if they throw the ball deep more, he'll hit on more passes downfield. There's a reason why his deep ball attempts are not high. There's a reason he's not going downfield a lot. It's because he doesn't have the confidence to go downfield. Now, maybe it changes a little bit with Tyreek Hill. Oh, now he has a deep ball guy. Well, Daniel Jones, before they drafted Kenny Golladay, had the highest passer rating on deep targets. How did that work out for Kenny Golladay last year? It was horrible. And that was another thing I learned from last year. It's don't overblow these efficiency metrics on a deep passer rating. We know who the good deep ball passers are. And you don't need to look at stats to necessarily know them. It's Justin Herbert. It's Patrick Mahomes. And we know it's not Tua. Simply put.
Yeah, there's one more piece of the equation you're forgetting. The other thing you need is time. It's not a great offensive line. You need time to throw the ball deep. You need time for that person to get open downfield. And that's another thing, too. Then that offensive line just does not do it for me. All right, let's go to the quarterbacks here real quick here. Sean, give me your over and underrated QBs when you're looking at the board right now.
So overrated is Aaron Rodgers at QB8. It kind of goes what we were talking about. We basically arrived at the conclusion that Allen Lazard will be his number 1 target, which is phenomenal news for Allen Lazard and terrible news for Aaron Rodgers. So, not only did he lose Devontae Adams, which everybody, realizes that hurts his value, he also lost Marquez Valdez-Scantling, which is his deep threat. So, that's going to lower his ceiling even more. So, Christian Watson and Sammy Watkins, not sure they're going to be able to replace that production. So, he's going to obviously post solid numbers. That's why I like Lazard. It's not like if he stays healthy, he's going to finish as the QB 20 or anything, but he just loses that ceiling that I would need to have to take a quarterback this early. Again, this is when I'm targeting Jalen Hurts because he has QB1 overall upside. But Aaron Rodgers, once you get to this range, just keep attacking wide receiver and running back. You can get a quarterback later on, or depending on league, just stream quarterback once you get to this range. So I'm not going to spend up just because he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He lost a lot of weapons, and yeah, it's gonna hurt his ceiling going into the season.
Could not agree more. So is it safe to say that your undervalued quarterback is Jalen Hurts then?
That would be a safe assumption. Okay. My draft plan last year was to target Jalen Hurts at QB9. And my draft plan this year is to target Jalen Hurts at QB9. And he has A.J. Brown now. So I don't know why his ADP didn't really go up from last year. He's obviously going to have, elite rushing upside for at least the next 1 or 2 seasons as he's allowed to start. But just A.J. Brown's going to help him blow the top off it. So if he could just improve a bit as a passer, he has 2019 Lamar Jackson sort of upside. So this is the range where I'm willing to just, roll the dice on a quarterback. And if he's taken before me, it's one of those positions you could just wait and get a guy later on. But I think Hurts provides that upside where I am willing to take a quarterback a little bit early on. So he's by far the most undervalued quarterback in this range.
On FantasyPros.com right now, Hurts is ECR QB7, which is interesting because Murray's at 5. And I can't believe I'm saying this. I almost feel more comfortable with Hurts right now than Murray, especially if I can wait another round to get it. All right, let's go to you, Andrew Erickson, the over and underrated quarterback that you see on the board right now.
So for me, the most overvalued quarterback is Patrick Mahomes. And it's a lot of the similar reasons that Sean hit on with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, he lost his best weapon last year. Tyreek Hill is now on the Miami Dolphins. And you look at Mahomes last year with Tyreek Hill, he was 4th in fantasy points per game. But no one seems to care because he's Patrick Mahomes and he's the best quarterback in real life. And that's just where you can get an edge because sometimes the overlap between fantasy and reality is like we know that Patrick Mahomes is so much better than Jalen Hurts. Like it's not even close. But we're not playing real life here. We're playing fantasy football. So it doesn't make any sense to me to draft a guy like Mahomes who looks like he's going to have a down year in terms of production. He has a hodgepodge of new receivers. Like, yeah, his best receiver right now is a 33-year-old Travis Kelce who put up efficiency lows last year. Like, why are we buying into, he's Mahomes. He's got to be the QB2 behind Josh Allen. Like, because that's what the ECR says, and that's what the ADP is. He's quarterback 2 when he wasn't even quarterback 2 last year in points per game. It was actually a steep fall off from the year prior. So, I mean, we see this all the time, especially with quarterback, where the production can be kind of fluky from year over year. And we always talk about the weapons. Who are the weapons that this guy has? Mahomes has the worst weapons of his career heading into 2022. And yet that doesn't seem to be phasing by drafters and rankers of putting Mahomes as quarterback 2. So for me, he's overvalued.
All right. Who's the undervalued quarterback then?
For me, it's Justin Fields for the Chicago Bears. And maybe this is more of a best ball take, I think, as I kind of think about it a little bit more. You look at Fields and people are freaking out about the situation. Like they're, oh my God, like he's going to be horrible. Like he doesn't have any receivers. He has this 25-year-old guy as a rookie that's older than A.J. Brown and Velus Jones as his number 1 receiver. Like it's an entire mess. But you look at, what he actually has. He's Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet. A up-and-coming tight end and up-and-coming wide receiver. What did Mahomes have last year? He had a receiver and a tight end and no one else. Like, you can still get it done with 2 solid weapons at your disposal. And what's also being overlooked and not being factored in enough is Justin Fields' rushing production. 56 rushing yards per game over his last 6. He averaged 21 fantasy points per game in his last 4 full games. And I get that it's scary because you're like, oh my God, the offensive line is horrible. He's going to get killed. Like, what's going to happen? And I think that's why I feel more comfortable with him in best ball because of the fact that you don't need to know. Because every single week you're going to be afraid to start Justin Fields. You're going to be like, oh no, like I can't start him this week because I'm scared of, this offensive line, defensive line matchup. And then you just go out and see him score, 25 fantasy points. And that we had something similar with Hurts. When Hurts was first kind of getting started, you were kind of like, just don't watch the games. Because you will be freaking out about how he gets this fantasy production. But I can see Fields kind of falling in a similar situation where he ends up getting there for the most part, whether it's in garbage time in the 4th quarter because of the rushing. But I mean, QB 18. I mean, this guy is like poster boy late round quarterback. as a guy that's an elite rusher. Usually, I mean, Trey Lance is ranked higher than him. We don't even know if Trey Lance is going to start this year. So I think that Fields is someone, especially in the best ball, where you don't need to start and necessarily know when to start him because the trust factor is not there. Because I already know we're going to see Justin Fields, rush for like 100 yards against the 49ers in week 1, which he did last year. And we're going to be like, all right, now where do we rank him? Oh, no one had him as a top 12 quarterback going into draft season. Now do we need to put him in the top 12? It's similar to what happened with Cam Newton last year. Remember, Cam Newton just came out of nowhere, scored like 3 rushing touchdowns. And then the next week, oh, what do you know? Top 12 quarterback, Cam Newton. So, yeah, I think Fields is being ranked too low.
Well, that didn't last very long. Thank God. All right. Let's go to the tight ends here and wrap things up on this note. Sean, give me the overrated and underrated tight end based on the ADP you've seen so far.
So my overrated tight end is Pat Freiermuth at tight end 9. It feels kind of dirty. I'm with Andrew, like going from 2021 Big Ben, losing him seems like a downgrade. But it's all about the pass attempts. They ranked 4th in pass attempts last year, so the volume's going to go down. The efficiency might be just as bad, but the volume's going to go down. There's a little bit more uncertainty. We don't really know who's going to be quarterback, Trubisky or Pickett. So just Freiermuth is a guy where I love the talent last year. He was one of my top streamer pickups once Eric Ebron went down, but he does rely on touchdowns quite a bit for a tight end in this range. He scored 7 last year. I'm projecting some slight regression there with 6 touchdowns this year and maybe a slight dip in volume overall for the Steelers. So I just don't love him in this range. He's sitting atop sort of like a 5 to 6 tight end tier where I have them all ranked within 2 points of each other. So he's at a point where I rather just wait as opposed to kind of chasing this sort of the ceiling production we saw last year. So gonna pass on him this year, but I could see going back in on Freiermuth next year once there's a little bit more certainty in this offense.
All right. So who is the underappreciated, undervalued tight end then?
It's got to be Dalton Schultz. His ADP is tight end 11, but he is my tight end 6 right now. And, he's not the most athletic tight end in this range, but he's in one of the best situations. Dallas got rid of Amari Cooper and Blake Jarwin. So he should be Dak Prescott's number 2, number 3 target most weeks. And he didn't run over like a 75%, 80% dropback rate until about week 8 last year. And that's, the rest of the season from that point on, he was tight end 4. So he's a guy where he's a bet on volume. It's not so much the talent itself. It's just the situation volume. He should be a pretty consistent tight end that you can get apparently at the end of, the tight end 1 tier. So just love his upside based on the situation.
Erickson, give us your over and underrated tight ends for 2022 so far from the early ADP.
All right, I'm going to go with my underrated tight end first, and I know that we talked about the Cardinals offense a little bit earlier, but I'm going to go with Zach Ertz because I still want to get that sugar rush. So I'm going to have an Ertz bar is the way that I'm going to get access to this DeAndre Hopkins-less Arizona Cardinals offense early in the year. I mean, Zach Ertz goes outside the top 100 picks, and he's easily the most roster tight end I have so far in best ball drafts because, I'm kind of waiting at the position, going to take a couple guys later on. I just see Ertz there, and then I just remember at the end of the season when there was no Hopkins, he was tight end 4. He was averaging a ton of targets per game. He had 24% target share. He was averaging 7 receptions per game. And yes, they added Marquise Brown, but I would assume Marquise Brown occupies the role that Christian Kirk had in the offense at that time. And Christian Kirk was also flourishing. So, there's definitely more than enough to go around between Ertz and Marquise Brown at the beginning of the season. The only difference is Ertz is like half the cost. Like you don't have to pay anything to get Zach Ertz. And you can start him for 6 weeks. And then by then there'll be a flurry of late round tight ends that you can just pick up off the waiver wire if Ertz's target share ultimately declines when DeAndre Hopkins comes back. So I think from a best ball and redraft perspective, Zach Ertz is kind of like the late round tight end. I'm kind of like locking in him because I don't view him as a late round tight end. Like why? Like they re-signed him to a pretty great deal. Like he's a starter in their offense and it's a good offense. So I don't understand why he's going outside the top 100 players. His ECRs in terms of tight end ranking is around like tight end 9, tight end 10. But just overall, when you're looking at the scope of your team, he fits in really well. If you're not taking an early round tight end, you can fill out your starting roster, with 3 receivers, a flex, and then you can just grab Ertz. And you're like, sick. Like I have a top 5 tight end for the next 6 weeks. Like, here we go. So that's my undervalued tight end. And then my overvalued one, again, kind of hitting on overall rank, not necessarily looking at him versus other tight ends, because it's Travis Kelce. And he's ranked as the tight end 1 basically across the board. And I just think there's more ambiguity to his ranking. I think that either Mark Andrews or Kyle Pitts could really push him for the tight end one. And I know that he's pretty locked and loaded to a high target share in that offense. Again, there's no Tyreek Hill, but his 20% target share was second best at the position last year, but it was still worse than in years prior. Like he had been averaging around a 23% target share in that offense. So I do question like how high a tight end's target share can really be in an offense, as someone that operates closer to the line of scrimmage. And I think it's easier for defenses to take away a tight end. Like you can't have there's a reason why Zach Ertz shouldn't be the featured part of your offense. And I think there's a reason why that the Chiefs have gone out and tried to sign so many different guys. I was reading an article from The Athletic and they've talked about wanting to spread the ball around. So I don't necessarily think that Kelsey's target share can really get to a 30% mark because he doesn't play wide receiver. So I have concerns about Kelsey's ceiling. I think from a safety perspective, I think that he's fine, but I mean, you have to take him in the back of the first round. That's really expensive for a tight end that I don't think necessarily moves the needle. When you look at some of these middle range tight ends that have really been the difference makers in terms of your lineup, it was Mark Andrews last year. Where did he go? He was a 5th round pick. The year before that, it was Darren Waller around that 5th, 6th round. That's where you saw the tight ends that actually made a significant difference. And I just don't think we're going to get the Travis Kelce as the perennial tight end one that we get every single year. I mean, he wasn't tight end one last year. Entering age 33, I think that we could start to see a little bit more of a fall off. So I think that he's more of a safer play, and I don't necessarily gravitate towards that in, with my end of the round one, top of round 2 pick.
All right, there you have it. The over and the undervalued guys in early ADP, according to FantasyPros.com, where you can check out, obviously, FantasyPros.com/rankings to get all that information. Sean Koerner, it was an absolute pleasure to hang out with you. You could follow him on the Twitter machine at @the_oddsmaker. Check out all his great work at the Action Network. And hopefully you get back to that number 1 spot this year. That's what I'm waiting on. Number 1, time to get back there, baby. Sean, thank you again so much. What do you got going on at Action Network right now? Anything you want to plug away? Go for it.
Oh, yeah. You can check out all my content at actionnetwork.com. Check out our podcast, The Fancy Flex. I'm just doing everything right now. I'm doing MLB props, USFL props, WNBA bets. Just keep myself occupied now football season. But you can check it all out at actionnetwork.com.
There you go. And, of course, check out all of our stuff we got going on at Fantasy Pros as well, because we've got that Best Ball draft kit over at fantasypros.com/bestball. Again, it's free. But if you are a premium subscriber, you get access to a whole lot more in that draft kit. And you also get access to all the channels of our Discord, which you can also check out for free at fantasypros.com/chat. But clearly, membership has its privileges. That'll do it for us. But the story of the game goes on. For Sean Koerner and Andrew Erickson, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at FantasyPros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.